led by Olympians Sarah Cowley-Ross and Chantal Brunner, launched a crowdfunding campaign to secure the naming rights to the basin for a year. The plan was to rename it the Support Women's Sport Basin Reserve, with the goal being to highlight inequalities within sport and the media's coverage of women's sport. Now, 50 grand would have done the trick, but when the crowdfunding campaign came to a close last night, just a touch under 11,000 had been raised. It's a bit of a substantial shortfall, but the group is still holding out hope that a corporate backer will pop up to get them over the line. What do you think, Raven?
I can see where they're coming from, but the expression "support women's sport basin reserve" it's just not catchy. It just doesn't roll off the tongue. So if you wanted to bring attention to women's sport, maybe either choose a woman who was great at sport,
right,
and make it that, or my friend of mine, I wish I'd thought this up, call it the bosom reserve.
Yeah, no.
How about that?
I like
gold.
your first
Absolute
idea
gold.
better.
That would certainly make headlines in the Daily Mail, and others wouldn't, would it not, Cindy?
The bosom reserve.
Yeah.
Look, the principle is great. The principle is right. Let's name it and respect a great female sports person, but that name itself is just not going to fly because it's too silly.
It's a lot of letters on board. It's like
it doesn't trip off your tongue, and it'd be quite hard for all the radio announcers when they're going, and here we are. Blah, 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 blah.
It's very hard to pronounce.
And in Wellington, we don't even call we call it the cake tin.
Yes,
but that's not the Basin Reserve.
No, but we call Westpac whatever
that's
stadium.
That's the cake tin,
Yeah, but that's what I mean, is that things that have the real name doesn't even get used, even if whatever you call it.
Depends, doesn't it? Yeah. But I mean, the Basin is just called the Basin, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, on a lighter note today, we're finishing off. A University in London banned beef. Goldsmith University in London, clearly a very green university, is phasing out single-use plastics, installing more solar panels. But get this, beef products will no longer be available in the cafes and shops when the academic year begins in September, while an additional 10p levy will be added to the sale of bottled water and plastic cups. So what do you think? Going to university and not being able to buy a hamburger with real meat, Raven, a meaningful move or some pretty cheap PR from your point of view?
Wow. So I keep meaning to eat this impossible meat.
Yes.
And whenever I go to one of these burger places that actually sells it, I change my mind. So I don't know how I would feel if I was in this situation. I don't think that would fly in New Zealand. That would be a hate crime, wouldn't it?
I made for the first time an impossible burger. My wife and I had a hamburger, but it was a beef burger, but it wasn't actual meat.
And was it nice?
It was really nice.
Look, I mean, I think
it was really nice.
Good.
Yeah.
But the issue here is not, I think it's more, the plastic thing, that's great. I think that's fantastic. But perhaps it should be more healthy food, not just ban meat, but have a focus and, a direction that, we try to have healthy food. Are they still selling chips and lollies and, cakes?
You got them, Cindy.
All that? I've got them. Right. Whoa.
Well, it certainly has not been a Drongo adjacent show this afternoon. Far from it. Because you've been with Raven Can and Cindy Mitchell. Thank you very much for being with us.
Cheers, Wallace. Cheers, Cindy.
Tim Watkin is on tomorrow.
Cheers, Raven.
See you later.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, potatoes versus property, the government reveals plans to protect crop growing land from urban creep. Paula Bennett's bowing out of her electorate seat next year. Instead, she'll be on the list and leading the campaign charge for her party. She's not ruling out working with Winston Peters, even though he reckons her move is, quote, amateur hour. Calls for sexual violence courts to be funded nationwide after a trial found they cut wait times and were less traumatic. The sister of the Sydney stabber apologises for her brother's rampage, and the cheap housing heat up, cocooning the place in bubble wrap. Have you heard of volleyball's estranged cousin? Fistball. Rnz News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with tēnei. The Environment Minister says urban sprawl is threatening the future of the country's most productive farmland. Over the last decade, more than 200 produce growers in Auckland have closed as rural land has been rezoned to residential to keep up with the demand for housing. The government has released a national policy statement to stop highly productive land being subdivided or built on. David Parker, at an announcement in Phuket a short time ago, said those soils need protecting.
The effect of subdivision on our elite soils isn't just the intensive subdivision where people are on an eighth of an acre section, it's also lifestyle blocks. And these lifestyle blocks have been encroaching upon these soils, not just around here, but around lots of other cities in New Zealand.
The draft policy statement will be open for consultation for 2 months. Te Rarawa Chief Hami Piripi says the use of heavy machinery to harvest mussel spat on 90 Mile Beach is sheer greed and has to stop. Far North people have raised the alarm with video footage of big loaders driving into the sea off Ahipara and scooping up tons of seaweed to which the tiny larvae attach. Hami Piripi says the Ministry for Primary Industries has increased the quota for spat and each year more machines arrive. He says this week there were 8 loaders and 11 trucks on the beach, and the risk to tuatua and other shellfish beds is unacceptable. Mr Piripi says the 90 Mile Beach Governance Board, which he chairs, has the power to ban the spat collectors' machines and may well do so. A Māori man says he was angry and frustrated when Auckland Airport security staff would not let him take a walking stick onto a flight, saying it had Māori carvings and could be used as a weapon. Piripi Winiata was gifted the tiripo when he graduated from a Māori language academy at the weekend. Airport security told him he could not take it on board as it could be used as a weapon. Mr Winiata asked if he could take it through if it didn't have carvings.
She said, no, it's okay to take plain walking sticks on. And I distinctly remember her saying plain walking sticks because when she said that, that was the point that I realised there was a real issue here. And so I asked her if the only difference between a plain walking stick, as she knew it, and the tiripo that I was carrying was the carving. And she said, yes, it's a mini taiaha.
Piripi Winiata. The Civil Aviation Authority says it has reviewed the incident and is comfortable that staff applied the policy correctly. The Minister of Justice says he can't promise there will be more funding to cover additional sexual violence courts. The country's first-of-its-kind courts in Auckland and Whangarei will become permanent after successfully bringing cases to trial a third faster than on average. Andrew Little says he's keen to see more of the courts across the country, but it's a matter of finding the funding.
We'll have to queue up with everybody else in terms of next budget rounds, but given what this report says about the impact, particularly for victims, but also effective administration of justice, these courts have a positive contribution to make. It's just the sort of thing that we want to see more of.
Andrew Little says traumatising court experiences can be the reason victims don't complain, so a more supportive system is a good thing for justice. The man accused of the Christchurch Mosque attacks has been excused from his next court appearance. The 28-year-old Australian national faces 51 charges of murder, 40 of attempted murder and 1 charge of terrorism. He was set to appear in the High Court at Christchurch tomorrow morning for a case review hearing, but his lawyers have advised that they don't need him in court and he does not wish to attend. It's not unusual for defendants, particularly those held in custody, to waive their right to appear in court. Flights have resumed out of Hong Kong following a massive passenger backlog caused by last night's violent protests. The airport is one of the world's busiest and has been the site of daily protests since Friday. The ABC's Catherine Diss reports.
About 30 protesters remained at the airport into the early hours of the morning as workers scrubbed it clean of blood and debris from overnight. Check-in counters reopened to queues of tired travellers who had waited for their flights to be rescheduled. Protesters are planning on returning to the airport today to march around the outside of the complex.
Catherine Diss in Hong Kong. A leopard seal that makes Auckland's Upper Waitemata Harbour her home in winter has been popping inflatable boats and upending empty dinghies.
Offa the seal has become a local attraction at the city's marinas, but many boaties have had enough. Leopard Seals NZ, a non-profit organisation set up to better protect the species, is holding a series of public meetings this week to address concerns. Its lead researcher, marine biologist Ingrid Weiser, says Offa's antics are not malicious, but some see her as a nuisance.
It's such a unique situation. Nowhere else in the world do we have leopard seals that come into the inner parts of cities. And so we are investigating how the leopard seals are dealing with it and how the public are dealing with it and how the management is dealing with it.
The marine biologist Ingrid Weiser. It's 5:05. New Zealand has won the toss and decided to bat in the first cricket test against Sri Lanka in Galle. The Black Caps have gone with just two pace bowlers in Tim Southee and Trent Boult, while picking three spinners in Mitchell Santner, Ajaz Patel and Willie Somerville. A short time ago, New Zealand were 10 without loss. Meanwhile, the England captain, Joe Root, is talking up his side's ability to turn around their poor start to the Ashes series when the second test starts at Lord's tonight. Australia lead the five-match series 1-0 after their emphatic 251-run win at Edgbaston. Fast bowler Jofra Archer, who will make his test debut, is being touted as the player who can turn the series around after finishing as England's leading wicket-taker at the World Cup. Root, though, was reticent to put that sort of pressure on the newcomer.
If you ask him, he'll definitely say yes, and that's what you want. Young guys coming in full of confidence and belief in their own ability, and someone that's definitely not going to shy away from any challenge.
Joe Root. England have not lost consecutive home tests for 11 years. The British government is hoping to reach a compromise with India over its threat to boycott the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham in 2022, following the removal of shooting from the programme. Indian shooters won 16 of the country's 66 medals at last year's Gold Coast Games, and its Olympic Association will soon make a decision on whether to follow through on its boycott threat. That's the news.
Surviving an avalanche.
You really want to fight to create an air pocket around your face. As it completely stops, they tend to set like concrete.
Panic in Sydney after a knife attack.
You just started chicken all daylight. What happened? You started to come running down. You just start moving.
Protests causing chaos in Hong Kong.
There are still passengers arriving at this airport. How are the police going to storm this building?
Never a dull moment. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corrindan, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, what is the role of the internet service provider in blocking harmful content from the public? And after 10, former Wall Street lawyer James Rickards on his latest tome on the state of the world economy and the risks to financial systems. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. A few showers tonight, fine spells increasing tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, mainly fine, some cloudy periods tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, showers clearing from Wairarapa and Hawke's Bay and elsewhere tonight. Nelson and coastal Marlborough, mainly fine, but the odd shower possible until the morning. For the remainder of Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, fine weather. Bulla and Westland, mainly fine, but a few showers in Bulla tonight. Isolated showers developing everywhere tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Southland, a few showers retreating to the south coast this evening, then clearing there tomorrow. Fiordland, fine apart from a few showers in the south. Showers becoming more widespread in the afternoon tomorrow and turning to rain tomorrow evening. Chatham Island, showers possibly sleety for a time tonight. Gale southwesterlies easing tomorrow. RNZ National, 8.5 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Pitting potatoes against property. That's how the government's proposal to protect highly productive farmland from being subdivided or used for urban expansion has been described. The Environment and Agricultural Ministers have this afternoon in Pukekohe released a document for public consultation. It would give councils a clear policy for land use decisions. Over the last decade, more than 200 produce growers in Auckland alone have shut up shop as more rural land has been rezoned to residential to keep up with the demand for housing. Environment Minister David Parker spoke to me just before we came to air, and I asked him whether this was now a case of spuds versus housing, as local government New Zealand has suggested.
We're actually preferring potatoes. There's no doubt about that. I mean, in parts of New Zealand, we're really losing too many of our productive soils to subdivision.
lifestyle blocks that stop, orchards, subdivisions that eat into the soils around Pukekohe, and we've got to get that balance better.
Can you put a figure on it? Over the past few years, how much of that land have we lost to housing developments?
Over recent decades, tens of thousands of hectares. To put that into context, I cut the grass last weekend when I was in Auckland. This coming weekend I'm in Dunedin. I don't have to cut the grass because it doesn't grow in winter. Every day, truckloads of broccoli and other winter greens leave from the Auckland region, not just to feed Auckland, but also to feed the South Island. And if we lose these soils, the price of vegetables will go up, and we'll be a less healthy country.
So what are you proposing to protect this productive land? What restrictions are under consideration?
Well, what the National Policy Statement does is require councils to pay greater attention to the importance of protecting these highly productive soils. So it makes it easier for them to turn down a subdivision application which turns horticultural soils into residential subdivisions.
So they can only build or only rubber stamp building on this type of land if, for example, there is a housing shortage which justifies it, correct?
Well, even with a housing shortage, you can still choose to put your houses in areas that are the lower quality soils. There's lots of land around Auckland that is suitable for subdivision that isn't these highly productive soils.
Is it near transport hubs, though, Minister? Is it in places where people want to live? You've got Phil Twyford who's wanting to build around transport hubs. Do these two needs marry up, basically?
Well, I've worked with Phil Twyford and Damien O'Connor on this so that we reconcile these two objectives. And yes, I mean, the new transport hubs that are formed outside of the existing Auckland area should be put in places that aren't the highest productive soils. In respect of areas that are within the Auckland region currently, this doesn't have any effect anyway because those areas are already in housing. It's just a question of how intensive the housing is.
Because Dave Cull, President of Local Government New Zealand, he says that some cities, well, they don't have any choice, no other option but expanding housing areas into green areas because they're in cities where housing is utterly unaffordable and they need to, produce more houses. Auckland, Hamilton, for example?
Well, it's true you have to get the balance right, but you don't get the balance right by putting the houses on our most productive soil and putting up the price of broccoli.
What percentage of land are you talking about that we're looking to ring fence, in essence?
Well, that's up to councils. They'll identify the most highly productive soils and protect them from inappropriate subdivision. Councils want this. They at the moment face a lot of pressure from someone to maximise. The speculator might buy the land in order to cut it up to turn it into housing rather than vegetables, and it's just not in New Zealand's interest. Otherwise, generations to come won't have the soils that they need to affordably grow vegetables.
Put simply, what is the definition of highly productive land? What do you see as being this land that's in contention?
There are various classes of soil that are scientific classes. The highest of those grades of soil are mapped throughout New Zealand. We've already got very good data on this, and it's those highest classes of land that will be better protected. This does not put at risk our ambition to build more houses. We're in the process of also putting out a national policy statement on intensification of urban areas and enabling appropriate development outside of those urban boundaries. But in order to do that responsibly, you also have to get ahead and protect your elite soils.
While you're trying to protect the price of broccoli in essence and the production of food, could you be driving up the price of houses by forcing developments into other areas? No,
I don't believe so, because there's lots of land in New Zealand. We're a country of 4.5 million people in the land area of the whole of the United Kingdom. We've got plenty of land. We can do both of these things. The problem is at the moment we're not taking enough care of our elite soils and we're compromising that unnecessarily.
Yes, we do have a lot of land, but we come a full circle, don't we, Minister? Because is the land that you're suggesting that be built on instead of productive land, is it where people want to live?
Around Auckland, there's plenty of land for people to live on. There's lots of soils that are not these highly productive soils. what we're doing is getting the balance right by protecting these highly productive soils whilst also enabling subdivision and more housing in other areas.
And that's the Environment Minister, David Parker there. Let us know what you think about that. What should take priority, food production or a roof over people's head? And how do we balance those two needs? You can text us at 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's almost 5:15. To Australia now, and investigations continue in Sydney after yesterday's stabbing rampage in the CBD. Murtney was arrested in dramatic scenes near York Street after he allegedly ran through the city covered in blood, brandishing a bloody butcher's knife, stabbing one woman in the back and fatally knifing another who was working in the sex industry. The 20-year-old, who spent the night under police guard in hospital, had a history of mental health issues. The ABC's Isabel Rowe has the latest.
On Sydney's Clarence Street, people were going about their usual business, walking to their offices, grabbing a coffee as they go. But today, work wasn't the only thing on their minds.
A little bit of apprehension. It's a bit unsafe, I guess, in that way, but we've got to get on with things. So,
aside from a few parked police cars, nothing of note remains at the scene of yesterday's attack. The suspect, 21-year-old Murtney, is in hospital. New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller.
We will allege that he's killed a 24-year-old woman for no reason, and he stabbed another woman in her 40s and potentially threatened to kill a number of other people at the same time.
Police allegedly found the man in possession of a USB with information about massacres in other countries. They also say he had recently admitted himself to hospital and was given some form of mental health treatment. Commissioner Fuller says his criminal history is unremarkable, although he was wanted over domestic violence offences and had been reported missing by his family.
He was on the system as keep a lookout for him for both of those things as a missing person. So from our perspective, again, that is not unusual in terms of what we see day in and day out in some houses across New South Wales.
Phone records show the suspect called a 24-year-old woman for sex work services before stabbing her at an apartment in Clarence Street. Police haven't been able to contact her family yet, but say she is an Australian citizen. The woman's death sends shivers down the spines of many women in the escort industry, according to Melbourne-based sex worker Rose Harper.
I think it does kind of shatter our sense of safety quite a bit. Obviously, with escorting, you're often working alone, especially, I don't know the circumstances of what happened yesterday, but I mean, I work from a Sydney in-call by myself regularly. There's certain safety measures that I take for sure, but at the end of the day, you know, I'm a 5'5" woman. I could probably be overpowered by almost any man out there.
Sex work is legal in New South Wales, but in Victoria, Rose Harper says women aren't always able to go to the police if they feel unsafe.
This sort of occurrence maybe isn't preventable, but a lot of violence against sex workers is definitely preventable, or at least more things can be done to minimise the risks.
In the hours after the attack, authorities were quick to label those who subdued the suspect as heroes. And this morning, Police Minister David Elliott told media that yesterday was Sydney at its best. Rose Harper also wants the female victim to be remembered with respect and honour.
I have noticed in a few articles that I've read that it's kind of been tacked on like a footnote almost, that, oh yeah, and by the way, a 21-year-old woman or a 21-year-old sex worker, they don't even necessarily always use the word woman. They just use her job title, sex worker was murdered, just tacked on at the bottom of the article, which is quite abrupt, and it is upsetting.
Rose Harper speaking to the ABC's Isabel Rowe. And the sister of Murtney has broken her silence outside her home, apologising to the two victims and expressing her sorrow that one of them had died in the horrific incident in the CBD yesterday afternoon. Ms Ney says her brother had descended into insanity over the last week, and she told reporters she was afraid for his well-being.
Mostly, I just want to say sorry to because she was like younger than me, you know, like she could have been like going out the next, like within the few hours to go like do shopping with her mum, eat dinner with her boyfriend, go speak to her girlfriends. She can't do that now, can she? Like all the words that I can say isn't ever gonna bring her back, is it? You know, like I want to say I'm really sorry, you know, like no one should have, because she was like defenseless and everything, you know. Like all of this stuff like about extremism is like white supremacy or stuff like that, like that's just like news to me. That's why I think it was like, using religion as an excuse, that's like, it's not right, sorry. Like, it's not correct.
The sister of alleged Sydney knifeman Mert Ney speaking to reporters in Sydney this afternoon. It is almost 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Paula Bennett is walking away from her Upper Harbour electorate, but denies rumours that paves the way for Air New Zealand boss Christopher Luxon to stand in the Auckland seat. National's deputy leader will take up a list position at the next election to focus on her new role of campaign chair for the 2020 election. Mrs Bennett won the seat in the 2014 and 2017 elections with 56% of the vote. She says next year's campaign will be different, but laughed at suggestions the leader might also be different.
I'm rapt to be taking it on. I mean, it's a big job and a really important one, but we've got a message to deliver and I'm really confident that New Zealanders will respond to it.
So what kind of campaign are you going to run?
Oh, look, we're going to be outlining to New Zealand, what a national government would look like, how we will resonate with what's happening in their homes and their jobs, that we can deliver a strong economy and manage that better than anyone else. And, we'll be pretty energised and it'll look different than it has before. But, yeah, it's
different in what way?
Oh, I just think that it's a different leadership under Simon. We've got a new team that's out there. We'll have new policies and it'll look different in those respects.
So are you committing right now to running a positive campaign, no attack ads? It's going to be what you can do rather than what everybody else is not doing?
Oh, look, we'll be outlining where we think the government have gone wrong or how they're failing to deliver on their promises. There's no two ways about that. But equally, I think it's pretty exciting to think about what New Zealand is, where it's at, where it's going, and what sort of government they need to help them progress.
So are you thinking about billboards already? Who's going to go on them?
No, I haven't quite got to that. We'll worry about that one a little bit later. But, it's a really interesting time in politics. People have a clear choice between, sort of three coalition partners that look a bit chaotic or I think a strong national-led government.
So will the campaign focus on the leader of your party?
Oh, look, the leader will be pivotal, and he is now and he will be then.
Even though he's not very popular in the polls, he'll be the central focus of the campaign?
People aren't thinking too much about that stuff at the moment, so I think what they're thinking about is what's happening in their lives and the rising cost of living and how hard it is to kind of get ahead in an economy that's stalling. So we're going to prove to them that we've got the leader and the team that can deliver something better for them.
Now, you are standing down from your electorate at the election in order to focus on this. You'll be on the list, right, and you'll be doing this job. Is that National making way for Chris Luxon in your electorate?
No, it's not at all. It's me making...
So he definitely won't be in that electorate?
Oh, well, I haven't even spoken to him. How would I want? I know people get to put their names up as they want to. I've only made the announcement today, but it's about me making a decision that's right for the National Party, right for my electorate and right for my family.
So there's been zero discussion that you've been involved in about who may replace you in that electorate as yet?
Yeah. Absolutely. No discussions around that. The discussion is about, me making a decision that I think is right for Upper Harbour as well as right for the party. I want to give it 100% of everything I've got, and it's going to take that from all of me to be in such a big job as campaign chair.
So briefly, what is the process for selecting your replacement in Upper Harbour?
It goes through a board selection. It goes through a members selection. So in that respect, our members, we've got a very democratic process. People put their names forward. They have to be nominated. That goes through a checking process. And then the members then get to select after listening to people and speeches and getting to know them.
So it will be party members who decide and not just the board in your electorate?
That's right.
Okay.
It will be party members, yeah.
So Peter Goodfellow says that you're an incredible campaigner. You led the charge in the by-election in Northcote. But, well, you shrunk National's majority in that seat by about 5,000 votes. So how's that great campaigning?
Well, no, we had exactly the same percentage turnout, and I think that's what's important. So not as many people came out in a by-election as they do in a general election, which is quite normal, but we upheld our percentage vote, which was around 52% in that electorate. I was the deputy campaign manager for the last two, and have so been actively involved there. And I don't know, for the last 20 years I've been actively involved in every election, and I love it. I love that campaigning of talking to people, of resonating with them, mobilising our volunteers and getting out there and giving our message.
So what is your favourite campaign? A campaign that you can look at and say, yep, I would like to mirror that. That was great.
Oh, I don't know. I think, as I said, this one's going to be different. I mean, we're coming from opposition, so, obviously the last few elections... Anywhere
in the world. Obama, Trump, Scott Morrison, Putin, pick one.
Yeah, no, I don't think I am going to pick one. I think I'm going to say we're going to run this one in our New Zealand way and from a place of opposition after 9 years in government and the first sort of three-headed MMP coalition that's looking pretty chaotic. So I think it's going to look really different than we've seen before. Will Simon Bridges still be the leader of National come election day? Yes, he absolutely will be. He's doing a great job. He's got the full support of his caucus, and we're just getting in behind spreading our message and doing our job. And so who will your potential coalition buddies be that you might be discussing things with leading up to the campaign? Oh, look, the leaders made it really clear that we'll be outlining that next year, which is about the right timing. We've got, at least 12 months to go until the election, and it's pretty normal to be doing that in the election year, but there's definitely options out there and some pretty interesting things happening, I think, on the political landscape. So Winston's not looking likely, really, is he? Oh, you never know, do you? I mean, we'll sort of keep talking and keep thinking, and we'll work our way through that one next year. So you're not ruling that out? You think there's still a possibility? Oh, I don't think it's my job at this time to be ruling that out. I'm just saying that at this stage we'll keep our cards pretty close to our chest, and the leader will make a call on those things next year. Not upset that he's described you as amateur hour? I love it when he talks about me. Winston only ever talks about people when he's worried about them, because he's a king at ignoring other things. So I always think if he's talking about you, he's a bit rattled. And that's Paula Bennett, who is going to be the campaign chair for the National Party going into the election next year. Let us know what you think about her seat in Upper Harbour. She's standing down from that electorate seat. Who are the likely sitters for that? And interested in your comments on her holding out hope of perhaps working with Winston Peters. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is just after 5:27. A Māori man is angry that Auckland airport security would not let him board a plane with a walking stick because they said it had Māori carvings and could be used as a weapon. Piripi Winiata was gifted what's known as a tiripo when he graduated from a prestigious Māori language academy at the weekend. Mani Dunlop reports.
Walking through security on Tuesday afternoon with his baby boy on his hip, Mr Winiata was catching his flight home to Wellington after a big few days away at graduation. But the 29-year-old and his son missed the flight after security guards decided his new tiripo, a carved walking stick, was a risk to other passengers.
So I explained to you, oh no, it's not a taiaha. A taiaha's much longer, different shape. It's a tiripo, it's a carved walking stick. And she said, no, you can't take it on. I asked her if it were a regular walking stick, because she knew it, would there be an issue with it? And she said, no, it's okay to take plain walking sticks on. And I distinctly remember her saying plain walking sticks, because when she said that was the point that I realised there was a real issue here. And so I asked her if the only difference between a plain walking stick, as she knew it, and the tiripo that I was carrying was the carving. And she said, yes, it's a mini taiaha.
The tiripo, which features carvings of his tupuna or ancestors, was a gift from his whānau for completing one of the most exclusive and top Māori language courses, Te Panikiritanga o Te Reo Māori. Mr Winiata reluctantly checked it in his luggage and had to get on a new flight. He says his main concern was the automatic connection made between a Māori item and violence.
The real issue of what was happening there, and she may or may not have been conscious that it was the message she was making, was to draw a connection between Māori culture and violence. And that, for me, was the real reason that I was not willing to allow that to go unnoticed, because that's a real damaging view for us to have. And to me, that still is the big issue for me, to see a carving and to assume that its uses for violence, then a walking stick that's uncarved that to me is a real issue. And I think that's why I was really upset in that situation.
Mr Woniata has written to Airport Security Services and has offered recommendations of how and why to change their policies. He says it isn't an isolated event. After posting his story on social media, he has had responses from people who have had similar experiences. Māori rights lawyer Kingi Snalga says it is a racist and discriminatory policy and says he hopes they change it.
Piripi is someone who's able to handle himself and ask the right questions of why Tipo wasn't allowed through, but what if this was a kaumātua or someone that maybe wasn't aware of their rights? So it seems like an obvious example of racism. The justification for why he couldn't take it through was not good enough.
Mr Snalga believes a mediation hui needs to take place and that the airport security need to accept they are wrong and undertake training for their staff. However, in a statement, the Civil Aviation Authority disagree. It didn't answer many of RNZ's questions, but said it had reviewed the incident in question and are comfortable that staff applied the policy correctly. For Checkpoint, Marnie Dunlop.
And let's get to some of your feedback quickly on the story about land use, or potatoes versus property as it's been described. Neil from Ridgeway says, about time, protecting the community's food basket must trump personal desires or lifestyle choices. And Peter from Masterton's been in touch saying towns and cities were often sited around good agricultural land for good reason. Their founders probably never foresaw the great sprawl of roads and houses we're getting now. Do keep it coming. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, police arrest 15 people in their search for Liam Strickland, but no luck finding Strickland himself. We'll cross to our reporter Logan Church with the details. A call from victim advocates for sexual violence courts to be funded nationwide, and the warm embrace of bubble wrap. We'll get to that too. Plus, a public meeting will be held tonight in West Auckland as locals discuss what to do if they encounter Orpha, the marauding leopard seal. Do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program so far this evening. Text us 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. There's also the email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to Susanna now with the headlines.
The government says urban sprawl is threatening the future of the country's most productive farmland, so it needs to act now. The government has released a national policy statement to stop highly productive land being subdivided or built on. The Agriculture Minister says one of the greatest challenges facing the world is how to feed a growing population. But once productive land is built on, it can't be used for food production. The Te Rarawa chief says the use of heavy machinery to harvest mussel spat on 90 Mile Beach in the far north has to stop. Hami Piripi says the risk to tuatua and other shellfish beds is unacceptable. He says the 90 Mile Beach Governance Board has the power to ban the spat collectors' machines and may well do so. The Minister of Justice is keen to have more sexual violence courts across the country, but says it's a matter of finding the funding. The country's first-of-its-kind courts in Auckland and Whangarei will become permanent after successfully bringing cases to trial a third faster than on average. The man accused of the Christchurch Mosque attacks has been excused from his next court appearance. The 28-year-old Australian national faces 51 charges of murder, 40 of attempted murder and 1 charge of terrorism. He was set to appear in the High Court at Christchurch tomorrow morning for a case review hearing. 9 opera singers have accused the celebrated opera star Placido Domingo of sexual harassment over a 30-year period. The women allege they felt their careers would suffer if they turned down his advances. Los Angeles Opera has begun an investigation. Domingo denies the allegations. The value brand of spaghetti and tomato sauce is being recalled due to rusty cans. Imported from Italy, the 410-gram product is sold nationwide in Pack and Save, New World, Foursquare and Gilmore's. Foodstuffs says advice from officials that the rust could affect the contents. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint, and it's time now for business news with Madison Reedy. Hi, Maddie.
Hello.
Sky City Entertainment, so its financial result today. Are the casinos making money?
Well, not this year, their financial result would suggest. So Sky City's full year net profit for the year to June fell 14.7% to $144.6 million. Now, its finances were impacted by one-off costs, particularly of selling its underperforming casino in Darwin, Australia. It also had more cost pressures across the entire business, both in New Zealand and Australia. And here's the big ticket here. It had a lower win rate against the high-rolling gamblers that obviously bet the house against it. Now, excluding the one-offs, its normalised net profit was actually up slightly to $173 million. That's the figure that Sky City relies on. It takes out the either win or lose kind of deal with the high gambling rollers there, so takes out that luck effect. But looking at the specific casinos, Auckland and Hamilton, they had a bit of growth in those casinos there, but Queenstown and its casino in Adelaide, Australia certainly had a softer year there. But also, who can forget the woes with Sky City's International Convention Centre that is still being built. That's across the road from the Sky Tower in Auckland's CBD. That isn't being built by our Fletcher building. It obviously has had major cost blowouts and huge construction delays, this project. This is pretty much at the centre of Fletcher Building's major near $1 billion losses recently. Now, Sky City has said that it expects this convention centre to be finished by the end of next year, 2020. Before that, they were saying it was supposed to be finished by about mid next year. So there's a delay of probably a few months there that they've announced. What they also have said is that they're not taking any bookings, despite them thinking that this convention centre is going to be finished end of next year come Christmas. Now, one would say that that speaks volumes about the uncertainty of this project and when it may or may not be finished.
Speaking of gambling, Medicinal Marijuana Company has announced that it plans to build a factory. Interesting, given that the rules and regulations aren't cemented yet,
this is a different type of gambling, not just betting against the house, but betting with regulation and law here. So this medicinal cannabis company, or hopeful medicinal cannabis company, we should say, it's Cannasouth. It has listed on the New Zealand Stock Exchange just recently. Now, it said today that it's teamed up with a New Zealand entrepreneur called Aaron Craig, who made some money in construction. They together are going to build a production facility in the Waikato, and they've formed a separate joint venture company to do this. They're calling it Cannasouth Cultivation. So what they're going to do here is they're going to split the costs of that 50-50. They're both going to front up with $1 million either way. And Aaron Craig is providing the land for this site to be built on, and he's going to lease it back to Cannasouth for about 20 years.
Interesting. Okay, shall we take a bit of a whirl around the markets?
The NZX Top 50 Index closed down just 5 points tonight to 10,850, and Sky City's share price closed down 1%, had a bit of a fall to $3.97 following its poorer result there. And the New Zealand dollar, it's buying at 64.5 US cents, 95 to the Australian, and 53.5 British pence.
Thanks, Madison. Madison Reedy with our business wrap this evening. Victims' advocates are calling for sexual violence courts to be funded nationwide after a 2-year trial found they cut wait times and were less traumatic for complainants. An evaluation released today shows the pilot has successfully brought cases to trial a third faster than the average wait times of about 2 years elsewhere. Charlotte Cook reports.
Specialist sexual violence courts in Auckland and Whangarei are here to stay after proving they deal with cases faster and do a better job of not re-traumatising victims. But the rollout of more of these courts across the country depends on resources and funding. Victims advocate Louise Nicholas, a rape survivor herself, says there's an urgent need for more courts like this because justice delayed is justice denied for everyone.
By reading what the complainants that have gone through the pilot have said, it was extremely beneficial for the majority of them, but also hearing Defence Counsel suggesting that this is good for not only complainants but also for defendants.
Louise Nicholas says the traditional court process can be traumatising for complainants of sexual violence.
It's a system they didn't ask to be in, and so if we can provide a safe environment for them to have to relive that trauma, I know that we don't have re-victimisation. We have survivors holding their heads high and feeling heard and believed, and it is regardless of the outcome.
Louise Nicholas says the specialist support provided in sexual violence courts helps victims to overcome the trauma. The Chief Victims Advisor to the government, Dr Kim McGregor, agrees. Her own survey found 83% of victims felt unsafe during court proceedings.
Complainants felt absolutely bullied and their character assassinated by the defence lawyers. We know that from decades of research in this area that for some victims, being called a liar and promiscuous, or that the complainant wanted the abuse to happen, can ring in somebody's ears almost for the rest of their lives.
Dr McGregor says some victims have described cross-examinations as more traumatising than the assault itself. She hopes with a more supportive sexual violence court system, more victims will come forward.
If victim complainants have more trust and confidence in the current criminal justice system, there may be more reporting. We believe that only about 10 out of 100 cases of sexual assault is likely to be reported to the police. And of those 10, about 3 are likely to get to court. Of those 3, only about 1.5 is likely to result in a conviction.
Justice Minister Andrew Little says he's keen to see more courts like this across the country, but it's a matter of finding the funding.
We'll have to queue up with everybody else in terms of next budget rounds, but given what this report says about the impact, particularly for victims, but also effective administration of justice, these courts have a positive contribution to make. It's just the sort of thing that we want to see more of.
Andrew Little says traumatising court experiences can be the reason victims don't complain, so a more supportive system is a good thing for justice. For Checkpoint, ko Charlotte Cook Tierney.
A charity in South Auckland has come up with a novel and cheap way to warm cold homes in winter. Ko Tui Tui Ke Papakura is helping families by installing low-cost insulation made out of bubble wrap, which actually acts as a makeshift double glazing. And as Chen Liu reports, it's just one of the tips being passed on in a series of healthy home workshops.
90. Okay, pull it out a bit. You can do it. I'll just tie it here.
The mahi started in good order in Dahira Cameron's 3-bedroom house in the suburb of Papakura. A dozen men and women from local charity Ko Tui Tui Ke Papakura, as well as Miss Cameron's landlord Housing New Zealand. A thermometer shows the coldest room is 14.5 degrees and everyone is waiting to see some magic.
We are installing with them some low-cost solutions to making their house warmer, drier and healthier. And that includes putting bubble wrap on the windows, which acts as a type of double glazing.
That's Angela Getting, the executive officer of Ko Tui Tui. They cut the bubble wrap to the right size, spray the windows with a solution made from white vinegar and water, then apply the material. Miss Getting says it will stick to the windows for the whole winter.
We're doing them on this one, bottom one, and every 3.
The short curtains are being replaced with full-length ones. And Jane Piahana, the charity's final engagement facilitator, says the temperature for a warm and healthy room should be 18 to 20 degrees.
Since bubble wrap has been put on the windows and full-length curtains with material backing, the temperature has gone up to 16.3.
Double-sided draft stoppers, some made by volunteers, have been put under the door. The volunteers say draft excluder strips, or what the group call V-seals, work well to stop cold air from coming in. The temperature continues to rise. Before I leave, it reaches 18.5 degrees. Miss Cameron says she has learned a lot from the charity's workshop.
Every morning I wake up and wipe the windows down, open up all the windows and doors, air it out just to get all the moisture out of the air. And then after that I close it all up.
She says her children will be happy to see the change.
They'll be so excited coming home. Mommy, what's that on the windows? Leave it, it's bubble wrap. Oh, look, we can pop it. No, we can't. That's to keep it nice and warm.
Since Ko Tui Tui Ke Papakura started its Warm, Dry, Healthy Homes program in 2018, it has seen more than 100 people attending workshops. The charity has overseen installations for 55 families and brought changes to nearly 200 children.
So what we are aiming for is to educate families on some low-cost ways of getting their houses warmer, drier and healthier. And that will improve the health of the people that live in the homes, so the adults and the children. And when we improve children's health, we get children to school every day.
Ms. Gatting, Kutuitui's executive officer, says an installation like this costs more than $1,000, but there is no cost to the family. She says they appreciate the funders who keep their work going. Mo te hotaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Chen Liu te nei.
And if you're just listening to Chen's piece on the drive home, do go back and have a look online. We'll put it up on our Facebook page as well. There's some delightful pictures and you can kind of get, you can see what she's talking about with the bubble wrap. It's quite remarkable. It is almost 5:45. It has been 1 week since a fatal hit and run in New Brighton and police are still hunting for suspect Liam Strickland. A funeral was held today for Dean Ames, the 46-year-old homeless man who died, but police have been unable to find 21-year-old Strickland, who has gang links. Our reporter Logan Church joins us from our Christchurch office. Kia ora, Logan, what's the latest?
Hi Lisa, yes, it's been 1 week since the tragic death of 46-year-old Dean Ames, yet the police still haven't been able to course up with 21-year-old Liam Strickland, who they want to, who has warrants out for his arrests following the hit and run just over a week ago. However, that's not through the lack of trying by police. Since the hit and run last week, a total of 24 properties across Christchurch have been searched and raided by police, and as a result of that, 15 people have been arrested on various charges. They've also recovered 6 firearms, drugs and 2 stolen cars. However, Liam Strickland still remains on the run. The police believe that he may have people helping him and are strongly warning the public that he should firstly not be approached, but also if you're caught helping Strickland, that is a crime which could be punishable by imprisonment. So in the meantime, a very strong police presence can be seen throughout the city, and particularly the city's east. We were at one property today which was being raided by armed police. We could see the streets covered by about 20 police officers going up and down driveways in the streets. So the hunt is still ongoing. However, of course, today the funeral for Dean Ames got underway this afternoon at a small private ceremony in New Brighton, not far from where he lived in his van in the car park, which was attended by friends and family. However, of course, the hunt continues for Liam Strickland, but the police don't seem to be any closer at this stage.
Thanks for the update, Logan. That's Logan Church joining us from Christchurch there. It is about 12 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The UK is first in line for a trade deal with the US, according to Donald Trump's National Security Advisor, John Bolton. His comments came after a meeting with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson at Downing Street. Mr Bolton says the US supports a no-deal Brexit for the UK and added Washington will be proposing an accelerated series of trade deals. However, critics warned the UK would have to give in to some US demands in return for any trade agreement. The BBC's James Robbins reports.
Although Boris Johnson will have been delighted by the enthusiastic support for Brexit from John Bolton, President Trump's national security advisor, and the offer to accelerate post-Brexit trade agreements with Britain, the Prime Minister has moved quickly to dampen any expectation of some sort of economic bonanza as a consequence. Boris Johnson stressed instead the importance of maintaining access on favourable terms to the European Union market, where Britain sells twice as much as it does in the United States.
I want to see trade with our European neighbours and I want to see trade with countries around the world. And we've got fantastic opportunities to open that up. Actually, the US market is growing very fast for the UK, but the single biggest deal that we need to do is a free trade agreement with our friends and partners over the Channel.
The Prime Minister also made clear that striking trade deals with the Americans would be the result of what he called a tough old haggle. With those words, he was reflecting some of the caution expressed by 2 former Foreign Secretaries, one Conservative, one Labour. They're predicting American pressure on Britain to harden its foreign policy, perhaps towards both China and Iran. Sir Malcolm Rifkind expects the Americans to drive hard bargains.
They will want things in return, and it won't just be chlorinated chicken. It'll be lots of demands, which if we don't concede them, we get nothing ourselves. And the final point of concern, particularly coming from Bolton, is, of course, do they want trade-offs for trade concessions in our foreign policy?
And Jack Straw described the Trump administration as highly transactional. It's strictly business, he added. You don't get something for nothing. John Bolton, for decades a leading right-wing radical in American foreign policy, denied there would be any political price. But he did not deny Washington was pleased that Boris Johnson's new government had agreed to join an American-led maritime protection operation in the Gulf. Could that be followed by further pressure on Britain to get tougher with Iran more generally? And Washington is already pleased that Mr Johnson's government is re-examining any role for the Chinese firm Huawei in Britain's future 5G communications network. There are suggestions Boris Johnson and President Trump could agree some sort of declaration pointing to a trade deal when they meet at the end of next week at the G7 summit in France.
James Robbins in London. The government has unveiled the first 10 projects to receive funding from the country's new international visitor levy. The initial investment plan of around $18 million was announced by Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis and Conservation Minister Eugenie Sage this afternoon. Tourism reporter Tess Brunton has more.
Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis says the projects have been chosen for some quick runs on the board that meet tourism priorities.
We believe that these projects, the 10 projects that we're announcing, $42 million over 5 years, $18 million in this first year, meet those priorities, and there's some quick wins that we really needed to get underway so that we could show to visitors that the international visitor levy, that they're paying what we're paying to use it for.
The projects include close to $4 million to manage Westland as a destination and $1.5 million for Kakapo recovery. About $42 million is expected to be invested in these projects over 5 years, less than 10% of the amount expected to be raised over the same period. Conservation Minister Eugenie Sage says the levy helps tourism champion the natural environment.
All of the projects are tangible examples of how visitors can directly contribute to protecting our unique natural heritage and also ensuring that we safeguard nature so that they have a good experience. That's what the visitor levy is all about, visitors contributing to the protection of the places they come to enjoy.
The biggest winner is an online jobs platform project from Tourism Industry Aotearoa and Auckland Tourism Events and Economic Development. It receives part of $5.2 million earmarked to promote tourism as a career. ATEED's General Manager, Steve Armitage, says the funding will help encourage more people into the tourism workforce.
It's no secret that the industry, although in recent times there's been some discussion around numbers of visitors starting to soften, there is still huge demand for talent to come into our sector. And part of the problem that we've found, and one of the reasons why we needed to move down the path of developing Go With Tourism, is that younger people's perceptions of careers in tourism were pretty negative.
An estimated 40,000 new tourism workers will be needed to plug the predicted labour shortages by 2025. While the platform is Auckland-based at present, Mr Armitage says the funding will help it become part of a nationwide solution.
I think there are a number of regions who will benefit from this type of tool, and obviously, we're hoping that in the longer term, this becomes something that is not just used by young people, but is also used by people who might be considering, a late change in career, have always had an interest in tourism, and might use this as an opportunity to test the waters.
Tourism Industry Aotearoa Chief Executive Chris Roberts is pleased funding is already being earmarked.
There was always the danger that the money would sit there with projects not underway quickly, so I think the government's taken a wise decision to get some investment-ready projects underway as quickly as possible.
$3 million will go towards developing options for the future management of Milford Sound. Air Milford Operations Manager Anthony Sprawl says overcrowding is a big issue, with about 1 million tourists a year through the iconic destination. He remembers studying tourism in Queenstown back in 2001, when it was hitting its first 1 million visitors in a year.
and the infrastructure there had facilities, had a terminal building, a fantastic airport, roading networks that were suitable for 1 million, but Milford Sound does not have any such facilities. The only thing, of course, is a boat dock centre there, which is obviously adequate at this stage, but for 1 million people, it's not going to be adequate.
Mr Sprawl welcomes today's announcement, but says he wants stakeholders to have more of a say in where the funding will go. Kelvin Davis says the advisory group charged with shaping where the funding goes should be announced shortly. The long-term investment plan is expected to be revealed in October. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, Tane.
Orpha, the marauding leopard seal, is something of a local legend in Auckland's upper Waitemata harbour. The seal has made a wharf and a marina there her home for the last 5 years. But much to boaties' dismay, this seal's favourite pastime is popping inflatable dinghies and submerging small boats. So a public meeting is being held tonight to educate people about how to deal with the seal. Amy Williams reports.
Orpha, the leopard seal, is a familiar sight, basking on pontoons around Auckland, where she's wintered for the last 5 years. Marine biologist Ingrid Visser works for Leopard Seals NZ, a non-profit organisation set up to better protect the species. Dr Visser's been tracking Orpha and says she enjoys playing with inflatable dinghies and has recently taken to putting her head on empty dinghies and flooding them.
We have to be very aware and warn people that if they see her in the area and they can avoid getting in their dinghy, they should do that. You know, we need to be smart. She is a very intelligent animal and she's big, but she is not malicious. She's incredibly curious.
The organisation is holding a public education talk tonight about living with a leopard seal in the city.
It's such a unique situation. Nowhere else in the world do we have leopard seals that come into the inner parts of cities. And so we are investigating how the leopard seals are dealing with it and how the public are dealing with it and how the management is dealing with it.
Leopard Seals NZ has a hotline for sightings, which sometimes receives 30 calls a day. In the upper reaches of Waitemata Harbour, the Herald Island Boating Club puts up signs on the wharf warning the public to keep their distance when Orpha visits. The club's captain, Craig Carr, has lived on the island for more than 2 decades and says the leopard seal's been visiting more often this year.
She enjoys the upper harbour, the peaceful tranquility of it in the winter months. There's obviously plenty of food, good fish to be caught, and there's no other competition for the type of food that she goes for in the upper harbour. So she's basically, top of the food chain.
But Orpha sometimes upsets the tranquil, peaceful community. Mr Carr says in the last 3 weeks, the leopard seal has destroyed 3 outboard motors at Herald Island after biting holes in stationary inflatable dinghies. The boating club advises its members to use their outboard motors because the disturbance chases Orpha away. Leopard seals are protected and the Department of Conservation recommends staying 20 metres away. A Herald Island Community Wharf trustee, Noel Rugg, says there's concern about people's safety around such a wild animal on the popular wharf that cannot be closed off to the public.
We don't have the facility at the moment of closing off the wharf on a partial basis, and we need to get a gate like a swimming pool gate type of thing to try and stop these people going down there in the wheel, because it's very scary and nobody knows exactly what action it may take if they get too close to it.
West Haven Marina General Manager Kevin Lidgard says Orpha the leopard seal is a boomerang resident who has caused significant damage for boat and berth owners, chewing marine offenders and biting holes in inflatable dinghies. He says the marina has just received a permit that allows leopard seals to be moved on with a hose. He hopes this won't be needed before the Antarctica native swims to the balmy shores of Whangarei for spring, as she does every year. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
And you can check out some pictures of Orpha, which we'll put up on our Facebook page. She looks very chill. And the Leopard Seal hotline number is 0800 Leopard, 0800 536 7273, 0800 536 7273. And the public meeting is being held at West Harbour's flagship restaurant starting at 6:30 tonight. So you've still got time to get there if you live in the area. More on our earlier story about the government protecting productive land and new regulations that they're proposing around that. This from Andy, who says the value of highly productive soil should already be reflected in the value of the land. If another use commands a higher price, then this is the market working. Restricting available land for housing will reduce supply and increase houses and rent prices. Francis, however, says Minister Parker is right to be very cautious about our food-producing land. That should take a high level of consideration. This country has got to stop taking that land for granted. Good food is the staple of good health for all of our people. And Barry is got in touch to say, evening checkpoint, evening Barry. A house is of little use if you cannot afford to eat, says Barry. I can imagine the uproar around CO2 emissions if we have to import basic food as well as the optional foods we already import. Utter madness to even contemplate turning farms into lawns and driveways. Build up, not out, says Barry. And Jan has got in touch to say, of course, protect good growing soils. Criminal not to. You can't eat houses. And this other message is that Food and Agricultural Organisation of the United Nations has predicted we will run out of productive soils as soon as 2016. This is a serious existential threat, Ian says. Thanks for your feedback.
Rnz News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Environment Minister says urban sprawl is a national concern and it isn't confined to Auckland. The government is proposing to protect fertile land from being subdivided or used for urban expansion. David Parker says there are examples of land around Tauranga, Napier and Mosque being lost to subdivisions. Speaking near Phuket this afternoon, Mr Parker said one of the reasons for losing arable land is a logical one.
These cities were originally put in these places because they were close to where you could grow your food. But as these cities and towns have grown, we've been losing too many of these soils.
David Parker. Over the last decade, more than 200 produce growers in Auckland have closed up shop as more rural land has been rezoned to residential to keep up with the demand for housing. Te Rarawa Chief Hami Piripi says the use of heavy machinery to harvest mussel spat on 90 Mile Beach is sheer greed and has to stop. Locals have raised the alarm with video footage of big loaders driving into the sea off Ahipara and scooping up tons of seaweed to which the tiny larvae attach. Hami Piripi says the Ministry for Primary Industries has increased the quota for spat and each year more machines arrive. He says that this week there were 8 loaders and 11 trucks on the beach and the damage to tuatua and other shellfish beds is unacceptable.
At the end of the day, it looks like they're collecting spat, but not really. They're collecting money. Driving a machine into the sea like that is just not. It is the epitome of greed.
Hami Piripi says the Oneroa Tohe or 90 Mile Beach Governance Board, which he chairs, has the power to ban the spat collectors' machines and may well do so. The Prime Minister will not be playing critic to Australia's use of fossil fuels as she touches down in Tuvalu for this year's Pacific Islands Forum. Jacinda Ardern says the forum will be dominated by talk about climate change, which affects all countries present. Fiji's Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama has already challenged Australia on its climate change policies and called on it to stop mining coal. Ms Ardern was asked about that criticism and the frustration some Pacific leaders have expressed about Australia's domestic approach.
Of course, like our Pacific Island neighbours, we will continue that international call. We will continue to say that New Zealand will do its bit, and we have an expectation that everyone else will as well. We have to.
Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand speaks strongly on the international stage, but ultimately each country has to take responsibility. The man accused of the Christchurch Mosque attacks has been excused from his next court appearance. The 28-year-old Australian national faces 51 charges of murder, 40 of attempted murder and 1 terrorism charge. Annika Smith reports.
Brenton Tarrant was expected to appear in the High Court at Christchurch for a case review hearing tomorrow morning. However, his appearance has been excused after his defence lawyers Shane Tate and Jonathan Hudson advised they don't need him in court and he doesn't wish to attend. It's not unusual for defendants, particularly those held in custody, to waive their right to appear in court. Justice Mander has excused his appearance for the hearing, set down for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Ko Annika Smith aho.
The former principal of a Māori immersion school has had his teaching registration cancelled after sleeping naked in the same bed as students. Uenuku Fair Hall has also been censured by the Teaching Council after what its disciplinary tribunal called despicable behaviour while on a school trip to Mexico in 2017. Laura Dooney reports.
Mr Fairhall was the principal of Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Te Koto when he and a group of students went on a 12-week study trip to Mexico. The tribunal found Mr Fairhall slept in the same bed as two students while naked, was partially clothed in front of students, and engaged in sexualised talk. Mr Fairhall said he had trouble sleeping wearing pyjamas as they were hot and restrictive. He told the tribunal he deeply regretted the impact of his actions on students. Ko Laura Dooney, tēnei.
The police have raided 24 properties and arrested 15 people in their hunt for the man wanted in relation to a hit and run in Christchurch. Homeless man Dean Amies was killed by a van fleeing the police in the suburb of New Brighton on Wednesday last week. Canterbury Police Acting District Commander Mike Johnson says Liam Strickland is still on the run. Mr Johnson says during their search for the 21-year-old, the police have recovered 6 firearms, drugs and 2 stolen cars. He says 15 people have been arrested and face various charges. Mr Johnson says the police believe Strickland is receiving help to evade detection. It's 6:05. The New Zealand batsmen have made a slow but steady start in the opening session of the first cricket test against Sri Lanka in Galle. A short time ago, the Black Caps were 56 for none after skipper Kane Williamson won the toss and opted to bat. The Black Caps have gone into the match with just 2 pace bowlers, Tim Southee and Trent Boult, while picking 3 spinners in Mitchell Santner, Ajaz Patel and Will Somerville. The 2-test series is the first for both teams in the newly launched World Test Championship. Meanwhile, England captain Joe Root is confident his side can fight its way back into the Ashes series when the second test starts at Lord's tonight. Australia are 1-0 up in the 5-match series after an emphatic 251 win at Edgbaston. England have not lost consecutive home tests for 11 years. The New Zealand pole vaulter Eliza McCartney has delayed her return to competition by a week. McCartney, who hasn't competed since January because of injury, has decided not to vault in Birmingham this weekend. Instead, she'll head to Paris 6 days later. She says she doesn't want to rush things with the World Championships, her main aim this year.
I just had a whole year of really struggling with injury, and we're just starting to get things under control. And although they're slightly niggly still, it's not so much of a problem, but I need to be sure that I'm ready. I don't want to injure myself in the competition. And of course, the end goal is World Champs for this year. And so we're just being really mindful that I need to get some real training in first before we start competing.
Eliza McCartney. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the oncologist Edmund Ang talks about bringing new humanity back into chemotherapy and how his patients are his greatest teachers. There's a window on the world of competitive swimming and why African people are underrepresented on the victory dais. And Tim Hoare is here to tell you there's nothing wrong with having the memory of a fish. Apparently it's in their DNA. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. A few showers tonight, fine spells increasing tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, mainly fine, some cloudy periods tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, showers clearing from Wairarapa and Hawke's Bay and elsewhere tonight. Nelson and coastal Marlborough mainly fine, but the odd shower possible until tomorrow morning. For the remainder of Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, fine weather. Bulla and Westland mainly fine, but a few showers in Bulla tonight. Isolated developing showers everywhere else tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Southland, a few showers retreating to the south coast this evening, then clearing there tomorrow. Fiordland, fine apart from a few showers in the south. Showers becoming more widespread in the afternoon tomorrow and turning to rain in the evening. Chatham Island, showers, possibly sleety for a time tonight. Gale southwesterlies easing tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. And if you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. As the Prime Minister arrives in the tiny set of atolls that make up Tuvalu, the small nation's leader has taken aim at Australia, despite a huge aid package to help it cope with climate change. Scott Morrison has promised $500 million to help Tuvalu adapt to rising sea levels and food shortages. But Inele Sopoaga says Australia is trying to buy off support and to shut him up about the damaging threats of coal mining. He says the aid doesn't give Australia an excuse to rely on coal. Jacinda Ardern arrived on Funafuti today and had this to say about the friction between Australia's coal policies and the plight of the Pacific.
Our relationship with the Pacific is based on New Zealand's principles, and whenever we go into a forum like this where there are a range of other leaders, we will take a principled position on behalf of New Zealand. So for us, that's about making sure that we are doing our bit domestically and we're doing our bit to support our Pacific Island neighbours as they make the transition around climate change as well.
Jacinda Ardern. Our political reporter Yvette McCullough is also in Funafuti and joins us now. Good evening, Yvette. What was the mood like as the leaders arrived?
Yeah, it was a very warm reception for Jacinda Ardern. She was greeted by school children as she came off the runway, which is really the centrepiece of this very narrow atoll, Funafuti. There was a lot of singing, and the children were doing a dance. There was also some children swimming in a shallow pool, so it was quite a really aesthetically beautiful greeting. And inside a meeting house, there were more children singing, and they had a very poignant message in their song to her. It was, "Save Tuvalu, save the world." And that really, I think, would be the way I describe the mood here so far. It's very much that the leaders here feel that they're fighting for their future, and they just really want to see real action on climate change. So I think that's how I would describe the mood and the focus. And Scott Morrison, Australian Prime Minister, also he arrived shortly after Jacinda Ardern and had that same welcome ceremony before coming into a seminar on Pacific Island work program that he'd been involved with. And he was there sitting alongside the Tuvaluan Prime Minister, and the mood, I would say, was very cordial. Mr. Sopoaga congratulated Mr. Morrison on his election victory, and there was no hint of that, tough talk that we had heard previously to his face at this stage anyway.
Yeah, so what are expectations around the leaders getting together tomorrow for the retreat?
Yeah, I mean, so that retreat is, they have the whole day together, and it is behind closed doors. So that is a chance for leaders to have a really frank discussion. So it may be that we see them follow up on the rhetoric we've heard in the last, sort of weeks leading up to this, and particularly in the last few days. But, whether it's that or whether this rhetoric has been more for an outward audience and behind closed doors, they're not, don't follow up quite as much. So that'll be interesting to see in terms of what comes out of that, in terms of the wording and the communique. Because at this point, the Pacific leaders are really pushing that they want a commitment around reducing the use of fossil fuels like coal to be part of that, and also to increase investment in the Green Climate Fund, which are two issues that could really be big sticking points for Australia. And Jacinda Ardern today wouldn't be drawn on her view on the wording in the communique either, just saying that, that's still to be discussed tomorrow, and she wasn't going to have those kind of negotiations in front of media. Yvette, you sound like you got a bit of a tropical breeze coming through there, so maybe hunker down a little bit. But I'm interested to know, with all this talk and harsh words around Australia, has it taken the focus a little bit away from New Zealand's relation with the Pacific? And are you getting any idea about how the Pacific reset has been received? Yeah, I mean, it does seem that the focus has been on Australia. It'll be really interesting to see when Jacinda Ardern has some more bilateral meetings, and we are expecting that she will have some time alone with the Fijian Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama. So it'll be interesting to see whether the criticisms that have been coming to Australia about them not really, walking the talk on climate change were also directed towards New Zealand. Jacinda Ardern was saying today, that her focus isn't on China's influence in the region. It's about her responsibilities and New Zealand's responsibilities as a member of the Pacific, and that her government is taking really rapid steps in the right direction on climate change, but she admits there's certainly still more that needs to be done. So whether they get called out as well on whether they're moving at enough pace on their bold ambitions for climate change.
Thank you for that. That's Yvette McCullough, who is in Tuvalu and just joining us there this evening. A Pukekohe farmer says he's waited 15 years for today's proposal that farms in the southern edge of Auckland should be protected from housing developments. The government has released a document for public consultation with a proposal to give councils clearer guidelines for land use decisions. Over the last decade, more than 200 produce growers in Auckland alone have shut up shop as more rural land has been rezoned to residential to keep up with the demand for housing. Bharat Javan owns Javan Produce and spoke to our reporter Jordan Bond and cameraman Nick Munro and said that it's been a long time coming and he's watched soil-rich land give way to urban creep.
Well, we're very pleased that the government's recognised that they need to preserve these soils, which are pretty unique and special, and preserving them for future generations to continue growing on.
How long have you been concerned about the creep of housing in Auckland and getting near your land?
Possibly the last 15 years. We've seen the urban creep, moving along, and we've been losing soils over the years. But I think probably in the last 10 years we've seen significant growth in Pukekohe. It's been quite obvious the loss of those soils over the last 10 years significantly. Yeah.
And how important is local produce growth and Pukekohe particularly to the national food supply?
Well, particularly in springtime, carrots and potatoes, spring production here is quite important. When the other areas of the country run out of local production, Pukekohe supplies and supplements those other areas, particularly south of here.
And how much has Auckland Council been in contact with growers and owners of highly productive land to protect this land before the government has announced this national policy statement?
To be fair, they have been in contact with us. We've made our views known to them, and they have been forthcoming, and they have acknowledged the value of these soils. But I think at every plan change, there's a different or council change. You have to reinforce the value of these soils, and I think nationally, a national policy would give councils, not only in Pukekohe but other regions, some guidance and recognise the value of what we do. Probably, I'm also hoping that we get some recognition in what we do, and some protection from reverse sensitivity issues. Possibly also, we would like to see a pathway into continuing what we do, which is grow fresh vegetables, because currently, with a lot of regulation around the national policy statement around water quality, it is putting under threat vegetable production.
Bharat Javan there. It is almost 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old climate change activist who has inspired student protests around the world, will set sail from Plymouth, England later this week, bound for New York, in a high-tech statement about air travel and carbon emissions. Highlighting the urgency of the climate crisis, the young Swede last month announced that she would not fly to any UN climate summits. Instead, she's found another way to get there, using virtually zero carbon. The BBC's Justin Rowlett reports.
How do you get to New York without any CO2 emissions? This is how. But Greta Thunberg isn't anxious.
I might feel a bit seasick and it's not going to be comfortable, but that I can live with.
The militia is all about speed. Look at her, she's just a giant sail attached
to a super light carbon fibre hull. She basically bounces through the waves, sometimes dives right through them. It is a very rough ride. It's a very wet ride. And to be honest, I'm not sure that I could take 2 weeks of this. It is thrilling, but it won't be comfortable, warns the skipper, Boris Herman.
So no washing, no shower. We just put clothes on and we keep them for 2 weeks.
There is no fridge, no kitchen, no heating, and no privacy.
So here you have your little intimate corner. You can hide here and use a bucket.
And look, poos only, please. But there are also no carbon emissions. The entire journey will be under sail and all the electricity will be generated by solar panels and turbines. But look, if we're honest, one person giving up flying doesn't make any difference in a world of 8 billion people. So what is the point?
I mean, the point, I think, is to sort of create an opinion. By stop flying, you don't only reduce your own carbon footprint, but also that sends a signal to other people around you that, I mean, the climate crisis is a real thing, and that also pushes a political movement.
But it's been a year since the 16-year-old began her climate strikes, and carbon emissions continue to rise. She plans to encourage world leaders to take more urgent action in New York. And despite the privations, she is looking forward to the trip.
I think it will feel good, in a way, to be just alone with those on the boat and like the ocean.
The voyage will take 2 weeks. Greta's team say they haven't yet planned how she's going to get back from America.
And Justin Rowlett with that report. In a development in the Tarrant case, the Christchurch Mosque alleged shooter, Corrections has admitted tonight it made a mistake allowing the alleged Christchurch shooter to send a letter from prison. Yesterday, a post appeared on a 4chan thread. Now, 4chan is famous for controversial comments, and the post was from a man who said he lived in Russia. He said he sent a letter to the alleged gunman 2 months ago and had finally got a response. The gunman's letter was 6 pages long and dated July 4. Corrections declined to be interviewed tonight, but says by law it is required to manage prisoners in accordance with the provisions set out in the Corrections Act 2004. It says in accordance with Section 108 of the Act, a prison director can only withhold a prisoner's mail in a very limited range of circumstances. Some letters have been withheld. Corrections says on review it acknowledges the letter should have withheld, and it has made changes to the management of the prisoner's mail to ensure that our robust processes are as effective as we need them to be. In a statement, the Minister of Corrections, Kelvin Davis, says we have never had to manage a prisoner like this before. And I have asked questions around whether our laws are now fit for purpose and asked for advice on what changes we may now need to make. I know a lot of New Zealanders will be surprised to hear that this offender is allowed to send and receive mail. But there are rights every prisoner has under the law as it stands. Corrections do have the right to withhold correspondence in accordance with the Act, and they have used this power to withhold some correspondence the prisoner has attempted to send and some he was to receive. And the Corrections Minister goes on to say, I do not believe that Corrections should have allowed this letter to be sent, and he has sought assurances from them that there will be an enhanced process from now on. Kelvin Davis says, I have made myself clear that this cannot happen again. The head of the Islamic Women's Council, Anjum Rahman, joins us now. Good evening. What is your reaction to this news?
I'd also say that I'm really disappointed. I think that this is a level of crime that hasn't been seen in New Zealand at this level for a long, long time. And the normal restrictions or lack of restrictions you might have on prisoners, I think this is a special case, and that we need to be extremely vigilant here, because this is a person who's shown himself willing to shoot at 3-year-old children, like absolutely no empathy, no, I would even say no moral judgment. And so we need to be extremely careful in terms of who he's interacting with and what he's saying. And I would just put a plea out that corrections do take extra care, because I would hate to think that any other community would be attacked.
Obviously,
his words.
Obviously, there is a court process underway and we need to respect that. The other issue raised by both the Minister for Corrections and the Department of Corrections is that, like it or not, this accused has legal rights. And so he does have the right to receive some correspondence and to send some correspondence. Shouldn't he be allowed to exercise those rights?
I think he should be allowed to exercise rights to contact his family members, to contact his lawyers and to receive any correspondence. I think he should be allowed to seek personal support if he is dealing with mental health issues. I think he should be allowed to correspond with health professionals. But beyond that, I think that care needs to be taken. We already know that there have been shootings around the world, several now, that have referenced his manifesto. We already know that what he has done and what he has said has had an impact and cost lives. And I think that it is incumbent on the New Zealand government to make sure that not just New Zealanders, but people in other countries are safe from the harm that he has been able to cause and may cause further, if not checked.
Are you wanting to talk directly to the Minister of Corrections about this, and will you try to have a meeting?
Yes, I'd be very willing to meet with the Minister of Corrections to put forward our concerns. I understand from what you've said on Checkpoint that he is taking the matter seriously, but I'm persevering, and I'm sure there will be others from our community willing to meet with the Minister and to give our advice and put forward our concerns regarding this matter.
Have you seen the contents of the letter?
I haven't had time to read it in full. I'm sorry.
Have you spoken to any other families in terms of their reaction and concerns about it?
So the families, many of them at the moment are still overseas. They have been travelling to Mecca and performing the Hajj, and they will not have returned yet, a large number of them.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That's the head of the Islamic Women's Council, Anjum Rahman, speaking there on this revelation that the alleged Christchurch shooter has been able to send a letter from prison, and that letter has now apparently surfaced on the web. Flights at Hong Kong's international airport are slowly returning to normal after pro-democracy campaigners managed to shut down what is one of the world's busiest transport hubs. But protests in the Chinese-controlled territory are showing no sign of letting up as anxiety grows over a potential crackdown from the mainland government. Many in Hong Kong now fear patience on the mainland has just about run out. CNN's Ben Wiedemann reports.
10 weeks of protests. Hundreds arrested. A key international airport overrun and paralyzed. Watching all this unfold, Beijing is not amused. A spokesman for China's Hong Kong and Macau office warned the protests have, in his words, begun to show signs of terrorism. The nationalist Chinese tabloid The Global Times published a video of the People's Armed Police, China's federal police, deploying in Shenzhen, right on the border with Hong Kong. 2 weeks before, the People's Liberation Army Hong Kong garrison posted a video online showing troops training to deal with rioters and put out a statement stressing its determination and ability to protect Hong Kong's prosperity and stability. Hong Kong's charm status part of China but apart from China, at the end of the day is at China's pleasure. Under the territory's garrison law, the Hong Kong government can request the intervention of the Chinese army in the event of natural disaster or civil disorder. And civil disorder is in the air. With some anger focused on symbols of the Chinese state. Chief Executive Carrie Lam has a blunt warning.
Hong Kong society is not safe or stable. The rioters have pushed Hong Kong to the brink of no return.
Yet armed intervention by Beijing would shatter Hong Kong's international business-friendly image and strike the death knell to the one country, two systems arrangement. Pro-Beijing legislator Holden Chow insists that doomsday scenario is, at the moment, unlikely.
I don't think the PLA will come in to deal with the situation because I trust the Hong Kong police and the Hong Kong SAR government has the ability to deal with the situation here.
Perhaps, but as protests carry on or intensify and their impact is felt well beyond this tiny, crowded territory, that could change.
Ben Wiedemann reporting there, and Hong Kong Airport says it now has a court injunction to prevent protesters gaining entry to the complex. Protest groups, though, say they will be heading back to the airport overnight, though they do not plan to enter the terminals. Just enough time for some of your feedback before we go on our earlier story about potatoes versus property. This is regulation to help protect productive land. Roman says, I remember from high school certificate geography, 70% of New Zealand cannot be built on because it's forest, parks and waterways. What do? Keep growing the population and building on our productive flat land until there is no more? Time to shut the doors, I think, says Roman. Thanks for tuning in this evening. Don't forget you can check on all our stories online, catch up on the pictures, and News will keep you up to date with that story about the alleged Christchurch gunman sending a letter from prison.
Rnz News Headlines at 6:30. The Corrections Department says the man accused of the Christchurch Mosque massacre should not have been allowed to send a letter that has been posted on the 4chan website. The minister says they've never had to manage a prisoner like this before and he's asked for legal advice. The government says urban sprawl is a national concern and has proposed a policy to protect fertile land from being subdivided or used for housing. The police have raided 24 properties and arrested 15 people in their hunt for the man wanted in relation to a fatal hit and run in Christchurch last week. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10. Is anyone coming to his aid, Tom?
No, as I said, there's no uniformed police here. He's trying to cover his face. And, that